So good to see everybody again. It's already lesson 4 of Revitalized Zen. And we covered quite a bit of terrain in the first 3 lessons. Of course, my texts about the 4 stages of Zen and bone marrow washing, there's a lot packed in those articles. And in my YouTubes about I think I made something like 7 or 8 YouTubes before starting to record these lessons. But in those YouTubes also there's lots of details packed in there. So it's good to watch, listen to those recordings or read texts more than once. Okay, so something that I haven't yet spoken in these lessons is the first Kensho, the first awakening, and I would like to talk about that a little bit. So again, let's not get confused about Oriental terms, Japanese terms, Tibetan terms. Let's not be confused about that. Because I wanted to say that because people do get very confused, kind of carried away with whatever tradition they're following, and they kind of develop a romantical idea and attachment about particular terms. So even when I say Kensho or Satori or Daigo or use these Japanese terms, we are not talking about a Japanese cultural experience, nor a Tibetan one, nor a Korean one, nor a Finnish one, nor an American, Swiss, or British cultural experience. And this is something that I remember when I was a young man practicing Zen. I didn't really recognize it, but I was very confused about Zen because of that cultural confusion. And I don't think it can be avoided completely. So, if you study some Tibetan system or Japanese or Korean or Indian or whatever, you will automatically get affected by some cultural factors, which do not necessarily have anything to do with our basic nature or Buddha nature or awakening experiences, recognitions of that Buddha nature. Already I realize, this term Buddha nature, it has 2 words, one Sanskrit, one English, Buddha and nature, and it is a bit problematic, or Buddhahood, because it speaks in foreign language, and always foreign language, even if you understand the term, you understand the term in your own language, it tends to place that Buddha nature or Buddhahood somewhere else except here, right? So these cultural factors, including language, tends to do that. But yes, awakening is what the whole practice, what the whole path really is about. From beginning to end, making our energy shift, and through making our energy shift, creating shifts in perception, shifts in how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive everything around us. So it's really everything about making the energy move, making energy flow, and then getting the opportunity to see what's going on when energy is in motion rather than when it is stuck like it is in samsaric mind. In samsaric, deluded, self-based mind that is colored by disturbing emotions, negative emotions and reactions. About the first awakening experience. So in the previous lessons we have done dynamic concentration practice, shouting practice, as well as ancestor practice, plus bodhicitta prayers, bodhisattva vows, bodhicitta prayers, and other basic prayers. And what happens with those exercises is that there is this shift from this let's say ordinary, stuffy, unclear, messy, sometimes chaotic state of mind. We shift into this. In the place of that stuffy, messy mind, we can discover this fresh, clear, naturally grounded mind or experience. And something that when we develop familiarity with that fresh, clear mind, is that gradually we realize that, oh, this feels much more at home than this messy, stuffy state of mind. And that familiarity, gradually developing that familiarity automatically makes this limited, contracted, stuffy, unclear mind burst layer after layer. It bursts. It literally bursts. Burst is the English term. And I'm talking about awakening experiences here, Kenshos. So the way how I teach and the way how I've taught for many years is to be very specific about these awakening experiences, about these Kenshos. Because when we can think this applies to any field or science or any art, when we understand and know specifics, details of practices and where they are taking us or supposed to be taking us, then the whole path, the whole process becomes clear. And if we don't have necessary details, then it suddenly becomes not so clear. And this shouldn't be the case with Zen Dharma or any type of Dharma. We should always have clarity regarding the path. It's kind of like if we think of a road map. It's no longer let's say 16th century, when people were still figuring out how to make maps. But if we buy a map, well, nowadays we have GPS, but let's speak of traditional paper maps. Like if you buy a map, be it a road map or a trekking map, any map that you might want to acquire, we can, we can trust that we can follow the map and that it takes us from where we are through all the different places in the terrain, perhaps avoiding certain things, choosing a ideal, better, most suitable path for us to follow, so that we can get to the destination. This is the purpose of the map, isn't it? We can use it. We can use it in a very practical manner, and same applies to, should be applicable in any type of Dharma. And this is how we do it in Revitalized Zen. I have written about this summary in that 4 stages of Zen text, the first long text, where I spoke about the Kensho process, Satori process, Daigo process, which altogether culminate in this Buddha nature, Buddhahood, full realization of Buddha nature. But the very first one, so now for 11 years I have taught this technique called the two-part formula. Two-part formula for generating this first awakening. And I have personally, I must have verified well over 200 people who have either done the process with me, so that I have actively been in dialogue with the person who is doing the technique and kind of playing ping pong at the same time, the student reporting to me what she or he is experiencing, and then I've given pointers where to focus or where not to focus. So there has been, I've done something like over 160 guidances since 2014. I haven't done them actively anymore in 5-6 years, something like that, because I've given that task for my students who teach. But I've guided roughly 160 people. But on top of that, I have verified the first awakening of, haven't kept a count, but many dozens of people who have either learned it from a book or a website and then tried it anything from half an hour to a couple of weeks, and then they had an awakening experience and then got in touch with me and asked if this is awakening or not, what they have experienced. So in my work in Amrita Mandala and now in Revitalized Zen, we have used this for 11 years. 11 years. And I have spoken about, well, maybe I will tell the story briefly now that I'm talking about the two-part formula. In 2014, I received an email from a French gentleman, can't remember his name anymore, but he had been a full-time meditator for something like 35 or 36 years. He had been like a renunciate monk in a certain style of meditation, and he had practiced for tens of thousands of hours, like very intensive meditation practice. And yet he had a problem. He hadn't had this awakening experience. So this was 2014 in March, April time, and during that time there started to be like a public discussion about awakening experiences in the context of Zen or non-duality, something like that, online. And he had read those discussions on some online discussion forums and seen some YouTube videos, and then he happened to bump into my Dharma brother in India, and then my Dharma brother told him that you could try to ask Baba how to help him with his dilemma. So he got in touch with me, and when I received his email in late March 2014, thought about this problem. I had my first awakening myself something like 2.5 years before that. And so I read his email, and I remember walking from the kitchen to the living room, and I sat down to the armchair, and suddenly I just knew the two-part formula. I remembered it from my past life. And so I immediately understood that kind of looking at the two-part formula, because it has the selfless mode and self-based mode. So you first establish this selfless experience, relaxing, opening, letting energies flow, and then you kind of feel it as an embodied experience, the selfless, open, easy experience. So that's the first mode. And the second one is the affirmation. I, me, mine, mine. Bringing back this thought of I or me or mine. Bringing it back when it goes away. In our daily life we think of this I or me or mine countless times during the day. So it comes and it goes. But in the 2PF, in the second mode, we purposefully bring it back so that it doesn't slip away. We bring it back so that we can feel, experience and look what that I or me is, what it is about, what it is made of, what it is. And it's so simple, but it really hits the nail on the head when it comes to the first Kensho. And the reason for that is that for many times in teachings I have asked people to do a simple experiment. And I've told them to raise their finger like this. And then I've asked them to point with their finger where their I or me is located inside the body. And sometimes they start pointing at the heart. But then if I ask, okay, well, is it below the throat or above the throat? And then if they're pointing heart, then they, oh, okay, yes, it's above the throat. They start pointing at the head. And then if I ask if it's below the nose or above the nose, and they start pointing above the nose. So, and eventually everybody is pointing at their eyes. Their fingers are pointing exactly behind their eyes, into the center of the head. And that is exactly where I often call it subject self, where that grossest sense of self-delusion is sitting. That's where it comes, that's where it goes. And this is what happens to everybody. During the day, during the night. That's where the identification happens, behind the eyes. So in the 2PF it's excellent in the sense that, we first establish this selfless, relaxed experience without this sense of self. Kind of like a blank canvas. And then against that canvas, we bring that sense of self, we bring it back. So you have a blank canvas, and against it we can see this very gross contrast. The blank canvas and then something, this sense of self, which when you start doing the exercise, repeating the two modes, one after the other, selfless, self-based. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Selfless, self-based, selfless, self-based. You start seeing that, oh, this self, this sense, this thought of I, me, it feels awful. It tastes bad. It tastes and smells foul. Like a spoiled. And then when you simply keep processing, ping-ponging from selfless mode to self-based, and you keep narrowing it down, the sensations, finding where the sensation is strongest, sooner or later that will that subject self, the grossest form of self-delusion, it will pop. And that is the first Kensho. That is the first awakening, technically first Bhumi opening. And this is universally true. No matter if you are a practicing Sufi, or a Hindu, or a Buddhist, or a Zenist, or a Taoist, or a pray according to Christian prayers. This is, if you have an awakening experience, that's where the opening will happen, in the subtle body, in the causal body, like I've discussed. So it doesn't matter who we are talking. This is a universal fact. I have done easily 10,000 Bhumi analysis, awakening analysis to different people, easily over 10,000. And I can say that it is a universal fact. Or let's speak of somebody who is very famous, like Eckhart Tolle, for example. Eckhart Tolle is famous for his Power of Now book. He's been featured in Oprah's afternoon, tea talks. And it's the same for him as well. So when Eckhart Tolle has written bestseller of his awakening experience, and he had it kind of spontaneously. He didn't do any practices. So it was still the first Bhumi opening. So it is universal. It's the same for everybody. And again, it's good to remember that even though in Zen Buddhism, in other forms of Buddhism, Buddha Dharma, we have these systems, systematized explanations of and categorizations of awakening experiences and other these things. These are universal experiences. All human beings, no matter who or where, or whether 1,000 years in China or 1,000 years from now on anywhere, we are talking about the same subtle bodies, same causal body, same astral body. And in causal body is where this notion of self, me or I, that is separate from others, creates separation, where that delusion is transformed into this pragya wisdom, timeless wisdom, selfless wisdom. So that's how it is now, and that's how it always will be. I don't think I will make at least for now, I won't make like a separate video of the two-part formula. I've discussed in YouTube a little bit, and now in this lesson 4, and anybody who is looking at this later can do a Google search or YouTube search and find guided sessions and of course the handbook of awakening, Awake Handbook of Awakening, that is freely available from Amrita Mandala website. So there's lots of material about this, and at least for now I don't see it necessary to make a separate long session on the two-part formula. And then if we think of the Kensho process a bit further, so the Kensho stage or Kensho process, it contains 13 major Kenshos, 13 major awakening experiences, which completely, well, not completely, but partially opens up the causal body. And the practices for doing that, from Bhumi 2 to Bhumi 13. So after the first one, after the first opening, the next 12 openings, we have already done the practices for that purpose. We have done bodhicitta, dynamic concentration, ancestor practice, and refuge, which are the main four ones. And of course, silent sitting. But when the first one is open, and then you have the practices, you understand the necessity of bodhicitta, compassionate heart, practicing to benefit others. And then you have dynamic concentration. So you do shouting practice to kind of persistently, stubbornly keep punching a hole into your subtle body that where otherwise habits and patterns just keep repeating themselves. When you keep punching a hole in there with those sharp shouts, this fresh, clear mind will keep appearing and reappearing. And this we have seen over the many years, over 10 years that I've taught this, is the, how do you say, Kensho generator. It really, together with bodhicitta, habits and patterns, self-delusion in gross, subtle and very subtle forms, cannot help but disperse. So I can say that kind of as an engineer or a mechanic, I can say that we know that it works. No matter who you are, it works. But again, I have to remind about the necessity of bodhicitta, that your heart needs to be in right place. If you're doing it just because I want to have an awakening, that won't work, obviously. It's a contradiction there. And having said that, if you do it just like I've taught, it will work like a, how do you say, it will work very effectively. I spoke about dark nights on the lesson 2 or lesson 3, and just to remind about that a little bit, when you keep punching through this habituated mind, and it reveals this clarity and freshness momentarily, but also at the same time, you are stirring the pot, in a sense, stirring the pot of the subconscious, and this will momentarily bring up all kinds of murky stuff and dark stuff. So I spoke about this in the previous lesson, so just to remind you that be ready for that. And there will be like very uncomfortable sensations. It starts feeling really off, and the air kind of feels like it's full of toxic fumes, and it just feels awful and so wrong, so unnatural. Then what? Take refuge and sit. Just sit. If it happens that that's dark stuff that comes up, this habits and patterns based on self-illusion, when they come up, what you can try to do, two things. First, sit. 2, take refuge, like chant the refuge in your mind or out loud few times. So that's one. That will always bring a sense of soothing, gives you support. And the third one is cut through it again. dynamic concentration. So these three things. The fourth one, of course, generate bodhicitta. But just learn to work with it. It will be challenging and difficult and a pain in the ass in the beginning when you're still learning how to work with it. But make it work. Understand that what I'm sharing here has been tried and tested by so many people, including myself. So just make it work for yourself. You will find the solution in these four practices: bodhicitta, dynamic concentration, refuge, and sitting with it. And this is something that Zen tradition is known for, is the work ethic, sitting a lot. It seems to me that in Western Zen, even lay people, I got to know Terayama Roshi. He was a lay master. He wasn't a monk. Never was. And his students, of course, Japanese students, were lay people. He also had a few monastic students, but monks, but most of them were lay people. And even the lay people, having jobs, having families, having all kinds of responsibilities and having to take care of running matters in their daily lives, they would sit quite a bit, from 2 hours to 4 or 5 hours a day. From 2 hours to 4 or 5 hours a day. I remember this one Japanese Dharma heir of Terayama Roshi. I can't remember her name now, but she was a housewife, and they had something like 4 or 5 children at home with her husband. And that's, of course, taking care of meals, taking care of groceries, cleaning the house, the laundry, all these things. That's like a full day job. Of course, when the kids come home from school, it's a hassle. But nevertheless, she used to sit 3 or 4 hours a day for decades, never missing a day. So even if you have a very busy life, have a family and so on, it's possible to do. You just have to prioritize how you spend your time, daily time. So yes, to me it seems like Western Zen practitioners, that kind of commitment of sitting 3-4 hours a day, it is very, very, very rare in the West. And it should be more common, because the Zen Buddhist method is really built around that sitting. So it is very important. So dark nights, and even if we are not talking about dark night experience, if we are talking about the Vipassana principle, Buddha Dharma is really based on Vipassana meditation, sometimes translated as insight meditation or analytical meditation. Vipassana literally means direct seeing or supreme seeing. Supreme sounds completely off, but it means like directly looking, directly seeing the nature of the phenomenon at hand. And here, of course, the phenomenon we're talking about is the phenomenon of self. Like I said, the grossest of that self, the subject self, sits behind the eyes. And after that, there is a whole variety of self-material in different thoughts, in different emotions, in different reactions, you can find that same stink, same smell, same feel of the self that you got familiar with when you first learned to do the 2PF with the affirmation. So that's a very good, I've had lots of people over the years write me that they might have been practicing, doing some kind of practice for 10, 15 years, but then, they might even know that they are already awakened, but when they did the 2PF, something clicked because they are suddenly doing the affirmation. And that teaches them what they are supposed to be detecting, following, picking up in their Vipassana practice. It makes it very clear, gives a very clear smell, hunch, what they are looking at, what they are supposed to be directly looking, and where, therefore, is the direct cause for insight to happen. If you don't know what you're looking at exactly, then you might be looking but missing it all the time. I have seen lots of Vipassana meditators, also in Zen, who have that problem. They don't know exactly, don't understand exactly what they are, how they are supposed to be doing the practice. So again, I spoke about Vipassana meditation in previous lessons, but when something comes up, stop for a moment, see that your head is open and clear, eyes are relaxed, jaws are relaxed, and then something has come up. Find where that something, where that energy, where that knot is. Find where it is located. And then you might find that, it is here inside the left shoulder, for example, or it is here hanging in the space in front of my chest, or wherever it is. Then you simply look inside, get a feel of that object that has come up, that is creating the disturbance. Get a feel of it. What's the texture of it, size of it, feel of it, color, shape of it, and also look inside it. Find that sense of self from all these objects that come up. Find it there, because it is there. So really applying the 2PF in a bit differently. Your head is clear, so you have the first mode covered, selfless. And then from that selfless, you start looking into the material that the mind and subconscious mind constantly offers you to work through. And then when you know what to do, then you simply keep doing it. And then it also has to be said that when we have a very strong reaction, it brings that dictator behind the eyes, it brings that dictator back to that throne. So when we have a very strong identification with some mind material, that even though one has had the first awakening, it will take assume the position here behind the eyes. So look at it right there, just like you did with the 2PF. Find it there and just engage directly. Like that. So the Kensho process There is a phrase that I like. It's an ancient Chinese phrase from, I believe it from Zen Master Dogen's teachers or teachers' phrase, which is dropping off body and mind. Shinjin datsuraku. Dropping off body and mind. And like I explained in my written texts, we are not literally talking about body dropping. It's not the physical body that drops off. When Zen Master Dogen, he also used this phrase, he was really talking about the mind. That is, mind drops off when the self-delusion is turned into pragya wisdom, timeless wisdom. And the so-called body drops off when different habits and patterns of selfishness and trauma and disturbing emotions are worked through. I will talk about the dropping off of body later, but here, when speaking of Kensho, having these 13 Kenshos, it constitutes the first half of dropping off of mind. That's the first half of it. The second half of dropping off of mind is the Satori stage, Satori process, where it's kind of, you could say that when we speak of consecutive Kenshos after the first one, you are not always having like you are not discovering something new with each consecutive awakening. You are simply deepening. Expanding is an awful word because it's not expanding in this three-dimensional sense, but your sense of this timeless clarity, selfless clarity, is increasing, and in that sense expanding with each Kensho. And then when you reach the 11th major Kensho, then something interesting happens. It's a paradigm shift happens there, because suddenly this awakened state of mind most of the time is there spontaneously. So you don't have to do anything for it to be there or it to be reinstated or reclaimed. It is simply there. So 11th Kensho is very important because of that. So this Kensho process, it really makes you familiar with this awakened state, awakened mind, Buddha mind, and then Satori process finishes that. So you kind of perfectly integrate with this awakened mind, freshness and clarity of the Buddha mind through this Satori process. In my books, Kenshos are Bhumi openings and Satoris are Bhumi perfections. Openings and perfections. And once again, Bhumis are discussed already in ancient Hindu scriptures, that the Buddhists took the concept, and in Mahayana Buddhist literature there is plenty of writings about the 10 Bhumis or 13 Bhumis. But I think that these texts have been so many times edited, altered, that it's not really practical what we can find in Buddhist sutras, which is the case in many other sutras with many other topics. But this is how it actually works. This is what the Bhumi process actually means. So, I hope that was, I've been talking for 45 minutes now, and it's enough for this lecture. So I hope that clarifies the first awakening, and some bits about the Kensho process. Once again, I recommend everybody to read the 3 books that are available for free from Amrita Mandala website that discusses Kensho and Satori process in detail through first-hand accounts. And we also have actually the Lion-Faced Guru podcast episodes also about this same topic. So lots to learn and to explore in these materials that we have published.